Continuing from Part 4. Another discrepancy. Expressions of Portuguese dialect. In the same chapter, Sochi raises other points that suggest two different texts of The Secret. One of the most striking concerns the reported dialectical Portuguese expressions that The Secret contains. Sochi notes that Cardinal Ottaviani had said that when John XXIII opened the envelope containing The Secret and read it, he understood it completely even though it was written in Portuguese. Yet Frère Michel of the Holy Trinity, author of The Whole Truth About Fatima, points out that the Pope had engaged a certain Monsignor Tavares to help him understand certain Portuguese expressions. Archbishop Capivilla also testifies that since the text contained expressions of Portuguese dialect, a priest was called, named Monsignor Tavares. Sochi insists this discrepancy can only be understood if there are two texts of The Secret, one that John XXIII could read without assistance from Monsignor Tavares, and another that required his aid. Mr. Sochi tested this theory by consulting Mariagrazio Russo, an expert in the Portuguese language, who conducted an accurate analysis of the Vision of the Secret released by the Vatican in 2000. Not only did Russo conclude there were many inaccuracies in the official Vatican translation of Sister Lucis' 4-page Portuguese text, which is curious in such an important Vatican document, but she found no regional or dialectical expression. This can only mean that what the Vatican revealed is different from the text read by John XXIII containing dialectical expressions for which he required a Portuguese assistant. How could it happen? Mr. Sochi constructs a hypothetical account of what happened in 2000 behind Vatican walls. Sochi believes that when John Paul II decided to release The Secret, a power struggle of sorts erupted in the Vatican. He postulates that John Paul II and Cardinal Ratzinger wanted to release The Secret in its entirety, but Cardinal Sodano, then Vatican Secretary of State, opposed the idea. And opposition from a Vatican Secretary of State is formidable. A compromise was reached that sadly reveals heroic virtue from none of the main players. The Bishop Dressed in White Vision, which is the 4 pages written by Sister Lucy, would be initially revealed by Cardinal Sodano, along with his ludicrous interpretation that The Secret is nothing more than the predicted 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. At the same time, at the May 13, 2000 beatification ceremony of Jacinta and Francisco, Pope John Paul II would reveal the other part, the most terrifying part, of The Secret obliquely in his sermon. It was here that John Paul II spoke on the Apocalypse. Another portent appeared in heaven, behold, a great red dragon. Revelation chapter 12 verse 3. These words from the first reading of the Mass make us think of the great struggle between good and evil, showing how, when man puts God aside, he cannot achieve happiness, but ends up destroying himself. The message of Fatima is a call to conversion, alerting humanity to have nothing to do with the dragon whose tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven, and dragged them to the earth. Revelation chapter 12 verse 4. The Fathers of the Church have always interpreted the stars as the clergy, and the stars swept down by the dragon's tail indicates a great number of churchmen who would be under the influence of the devil. This was Pope John Paul II's way of explaining that the Third Secret also predicts a great apostasy. It was an implicit revelation of The Secret. This way, the Vatican, and the Pope himself, could not be accused of lying to direct questions. Has the Third Secret been entirely revealed? Answer: yes, it all has been fully revealed. There are some who may find this hypothesis difficult or far-fetched. Normal people, they might object, just don't act this way. I, however, find the hypothesis plausible. First, we have the recent statement by Bishop Williamson of the Society of St. Pius X, who relates that a priest acquaintance from Austria told him that Cardinal Ratzinger confided to the Austrian priest that he had two things weighing on his conscience. One was his mishandling of the Message of Fatima on June 26, the other was his 1988 mishandling of Archbishop Lefebvre. Cardinal Ratzinger is reported to have said that in the case of Archbishop Lefebvre, I failed, and in the case of Fatima, my hand was forced. Sochi's hypothesis supports Cardinal Ratzinger's alleged statement on the forcing of his hand. Second, anyone familiar with Vatican Romanita should have no difficulty accepting the plausibility of such a hypothesis. The Vatican is a Roman bureaucracy in place since the time of Charlemagne. It can be the most tactful and prudent at its best, or the most evasive and cunning at its worst. Romanita is a brand of power that is master of the understatement. It is adept at slipping out of awkward situations. It neither affirms nor denies. It responds to questions by asking its own questions. It evades with a disarming charm. As we now live in a period when the smoke of Satan has entered the Church, we must painfully admit that the post-conciliar Vatican, in most cases, has long abandoned the gospel dictum, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." Matthew chapter 5 verse 37. This is one of the reasons the hard-hitting traditionalist publication in Italy called itself CC No No, literally yes, yes, no, no, since getting a straight yes or no from present-day Vatican officials, finding out what a Vatican official truly thinks, can prove an impossible task. Two examples may help illustrate. Pope John Paul II conducted his official papal apology on March 12, 2000 as part of his year-long Millennium celebrations. He asked Cardinal Ratzinger to prepare a theological defense of the apology program to be issued from the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Cardinal Ratzinger, who is certainly a progressivist, nonetheless did not approve of this program of apologies. So here is how he handled his commission. According to Vatican journalist Sandro Magister, one of the most pro-Ratzinger journalists in Rome, Cardinal Ratzinger constructed the arguments against the apology program with great firmness and precision. He then constructed the answers to these arguments in a weak and vapid manner. This was the cardinal's way of stating, indirectly, that the program of papal apologies could not be defended theologically. Yet he dared not say this openly. One would never know without a special clairvoyance capable of reading the cardinal's mind that this was his intention. What the Catholic ended up with, however, was Memory and Reconciliation, one of the most ridiculous, doctrinally unsound documents the post-conciliar Vatican ever produced. It was delirium straight from the sickbed. Yet this document came from the man whose first duty was to ensure the integrity of doctrine. Again, no one could here accuse the cardinal of heroic virtue, but it gives a picture of how the Vatican operates. In the name of obedience, or at least in a certain compromise with obedience, Cardinal Ratzinger published a document on a doctrinal matter that misled Catholic faithful by the millions. Then there is another sad example of less than admirable integrity from today's Vatican, one that I experienced firsthand. Obey. Years ago, I was with a Tridentine Mass community who after 1988 had looked into the possibility of regularization. In January 1994, two of us traveled to the Ecclesia Dei office in Rome to discuss the possibility. As for regularization, the trip was a waste of time, but as for hard lessons on how today's Vatican operates, it was invaluable. At one point of our meeting, Father Arthur B. Calkins from the Vatican's Ecclesia Dei office told us that it was our duty to obey. And if the commands are bad, the guilt does not fall on us, but falls on our commanders. Father Calkins was serious. I could not believe my ears. This mode of blind obedience, advanced by a Vatican official, means that Catholic clergy, religious, and even Vatican functionaries, will carry out commands that are actually harmful to the faith and harmful to souls, all the while telling themselves they incur no personal responsibility because I was only following orders, it's my superior's fault, not mine. The new Mass, altar girls, communion in the hand, rock and roll World Youth Days, pan-religious activity with pagan religions, all of these affronts to the Catholic faith are served up in the name of obedience, which is not true obedience, but cowardice and servitude. If the Vatican now operates on this principle as a matter of policy, which is a perversion of the filial piety that the Catholic owes his religious superiors, then it is no wonder that official anomalies and malfeasances stampede throughout the Catholic world. It also helps to explain Mr. Sochi's hypothesis of the compromised release of the Third Secret. Mainstream reviews. Sochi's book contains many other points too numerous to detail here. He speaks of John XXIII's and Paul VI's mild contempt for Sister Lucy, the fact that the hidden part of the secret predicts a grave crisis of faith and probably contains negative warnings about Vatican II, the absurd November 17, 2001 closed-door interview with Sister Lucy by then Archbishop Bertoni in which he claimed that Sister Lucy agreed with everything in the June 26 document, even though the document undermined Fatima so severely that the Los Angeles Times headlined its article on it. The Vatican's top theologian gently debunked the Fatima cult. Sochi further says that the unpublished text of The Secret most likely contains warnings of immense natural disasters. As for the consecration of Russia, Sochi concludes that it has yet to be accomplished. This is evidenced by simply looking at the decadent state of Russia. We can only applaud Sochi's common sense. Only the most irreligious and brain-dead commentators could insist that today's Russia, now rampant with divorce, abortion, cults, and homosexuality, attests to the promised triumph of the Immaculate Heart. There is much more contained in the book's 252 pages. As it is published by a major publishing house in Italy, it is likely to enjoy wide circulation and generate much discussion. A Catholic Family News contact in Rome tells us the book received mainstream reviews in all the major Italian newspapers including Il Corriere della Sera, La Stampa, Libero and Il Giornale, and it seems to be causing a good bit of turmoil inside the Vatican. As we go to press, December 2006, the Vatican has issued no comment. We can only hope the book will be published in English, and other major languages, as soon as possible. The controversy about whether or not everything was revealed that the Virgin Mary said at Fatima still stands despite the fact that in the year 2000 the Vatican revealed the Third Secret that Sister Lucia had handed over to be opened in the decade of the 60s, and that successive popes read and did not consider it opportune to publish. The Fatimists did not consider that what Cardinal Bertoni read in the year 2000 was effectively all that the Vatican had in its power. In this article Cesar Uribari tries to get out of the corset of whether there is a third hidden secret and puts his emphasis on the need of revelation of the whole message, which was artificially divided into three parts. The real hidden story of Fatima is fascinating. Today we know that we owe the publication of the Third Secret to the tenacity of the Fatimists. Cardinal Bertoni should have recognized it bluntly, in the face of what, from Rome, was considered an almost unbearable pressure. Father Kramer was tenacious, and his crusade apparently seen as effective. Nevertheless, such pressure did not cease with the publication of The Third Secret. That year 2000, the Fatimaists must have felt morally comforted. However, something dark kept the pain of a promise unfulfilled since 1960 from closing. The Third Secret presented by the congregation of the then prefect Ratzinger was linked to a manuscript text of Sister Lucia that seemed to clash with all previous data held about it. And not from minor sources, that the very Cardinal Ottaviani had been the one to fix the filmy knowledge that could be had about it before its publication. It is written on a sheet of paper. But against the advice of the newspaper library, Ratzinger's congregation was presenting a text of 4 pages. When the journalist of Carles brings such a contradiction to Bertoni's attention, the Secretary of the Vatican State washed his hands. I do not know why Ottaviani said that. A strange way of adding wood to a fire instead of extinguishing it, for it was not to be expected that Ottaviani would have been wrong in such a question. Such was the magnetism that Fatima would cause in those years, nor was it to be expected that Bertoni would not know why the great Ottaviani could have said that. The question had no additional alternative, either Ottaviani was wrong or truly such a manuscript existed. And Bertoni knew which of either possibility was correct. At the end, the battle, like all battles of ideas, it was discoursed through the clarifying world of publications. Some contributed data, another defended himself. Needless to say who were some and who was another. But this battle had changed stage. Now the magnetism that in its day had awakened everything related to Fatima had declined, almost disappeared. Not in vain 100 years are not few years. And since that the 13th of July 1917, in which heaven reinterpreted to man his very history, leaving a mysterious vision as a colophon of disconcerting messages, too many had been the events in the history of man so as to be able to say that nothing had happened. Technological, medical, scientific advancements, social, structural, national changes. And wars. Predicted, and that took place. Without forgetting the pressure on the papacy, from within and from outside, leading up to the attack in St. Peter's Square. And even with everything, how much is yet to be known? From the Bulgarian track to the Turkish track. And Ali Agca without understanding why the Polish Pope had not yet died. In those years when the content of the Third Secret was not known, there spread the feeling that much more was about to happen, and that much of that would have been predicted by the mysterious secret. But after the official publication, the sum of the time elapsed since that 1917 along with the official theological interpretation, had composed a music that made us forget the lyrics. Lyrics so evident that they were the same literalness of the Third Secret. And so the past attraction of a secret to be revealed seated before an official text that apparently reinterpreted some images of undeniable dramatic weight in another image already stamped on the contemporary imagination of a pope fainting, dying in a jeep in St. Peter's Square. Everything belongs to the past, the Holy See seemed to say. And such audacity was answered swiftly. We have been cheated of the Third Secret, said the Fatimist sector, and with them a countless number of Catholics of the most reputable intelligentsia added to the confusion of such an interpretation. And so began the battle of the ordinal third. Some because they felt cheated, and another for being astute, interwove the plot that continued to feed a public opinion each time more bored and forgetful of the theme of Fatima. Who could be interested whether or not the Third Secret was complete? The subsequent events showed that it was few. And that discussion, which was extinguishing the attraction about Fatima, Bertoni was feeding with pleasure, asserting his strategic capacity, because ultimately he achieved that the more it was argued, the more the interest declined. It was a game that ended to a shadow of himself, if the third secret was complete or not. And that each time was less interesting and interested fewer people. Had not Bertoni achieved his objective, shifting the focus away from the manifested holes? What holes? A clue will be given by Bertoni himself the day of the official publication of the third secret. In that press conference after the unveiling he will be asked if the phrase "in Portugal the dogma of the faith will always be preserved" corresponds to the third secret. His response, if dubiously in the forms, is sharp: it belongs to the second. It could seem that such a response is inconsequential. But no. John Paul II had committed himself to publishing the secret, but he was conscious, and his think tank of the Holy See more so still, that that previous phrase was itself a bomb. And even more if that phrase was concluded by an enigmatic ellipsis. Something else must have been said to Sister Lucia of which she did not record. That is why that ellipsis was seen by all the scholars as the clue to the third secret. The problem is reborn when the famous secret is published. It does not fit into that phrase, principally because the third secret is a visual image and that phrase are words of the Blessed Virgin. Later there could be something more to that ellipsis different from the image of the third secret. But Bertoni's response in that press conference opens new clues. The most logical thing was to understand that ellipsis, belonging to the second secret, would be something different from the third. And had not Bertoni persisted in saying that the third secret had been completely revealed? And had not the Holy See insisted on its word in that nothing of the third secret was left to be revealed? We already know why they said it and why Bertoni pretended to maintain that discussion and in those terms, because the third secret had been revealed completely but not the second. And redirecting the game to those terms, distancing from public opinion the demand of a response never given to that ellipsis and to the same text revealed of the third secret would be accomplished. Let us leave that discussion. Let us return to what we ignore. What is missing from that phrase about Portugal? What did Sister Lucia want to say with that ellipsis? The question can no longer be whether or not the third secret is complete. Now the question is another: is the global secret of that the 13th of July complete, that is, the only secret the children divided in 3 parts? Has it all been said? Is something hidden? And yet with everything, it disconcerts to see that even about what has been revealed, they have been able to expose shadows in the most sibilant way, hiding what is manifest, a whole theology scorned, silenced, forgotten. And with a heavy prophetic load. What theology? The theology of history, of the battle between good and evil, of the responsibility of the Church, in which, like with the chosen people, the infidelity to its election was accompanied by punishments and sufferings. And what prophecies? The narration of a concrete pope who would die a martyr, or would it be several? The narration of a global martyrdom of the souls faithful to Peter in a panorama of destruction and violence. Because all of that, such as it is narrated by the third secret. In plain language, without mediocrities. And that some of that emerges naturally from its reading confirms the very reaction of John XXIII, who, when after reading The Secret, said that it did not belong to his pontificate, intuiting that the graphic narrative exceeded the communist horror he was living. Or the same John Paul II, when months after his attack would ask Sister Lucia for an answer about whether there was much time left before the total fulfillment of what was prophesied. Or the same Benedict XVI, when on his trip to Fatima, recovers the urgency and seriousness of what was prophesied, without forgetting when as a cardinal and prefect he remembers that what is said in the third secret could still be pending in being verified. Therefore, the temporary categories continue to disconcert. It is clear that heaven speaks in meta-historical terms, not temporal ones. But it is also true that all meta-historical categories are inserted in a temporal reality, of which it speaks and from which its meaning is revealed, clarifying both its whys as well as its to wheres. Therefore, as much as has elapsed since the warning, if the moral reality that lies below does not rectify the way, what is predicted will not cease to be a predictable and verifiable consequence, so at the end, like in Nineveh, what at the beginning was avoided by a rectification of hearts, future ages will verify when it returns to its old ways. Except that Nineveh listened once at least to the words of the prophet, and these, our times, reaffirm themselves day to day in their scorn.